Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to give folks a couple more minutes to trickle in. If they're anything like me, they likely had a meeting immediately before this. So I want to give some people some time to breathe for a moment and then hop on. But in the meantime, for those of us who are here, if you can drop your name, the organization that you represent, or the community that you represent in the chat. And it is beautiful here in southeastern Michigan. So let's have a little fun, a little icebreaker. What are you most excited about with the change, hopefully permanent change in the weather? So name, organization, what are you most excited about with the change, hopefully permanent in the weather? I see Allison's excited about being outside. Absolutely. Same thing for me and my littles. They're loving being outside. Sarah gardening and flowers. Yes, I put down my mulch today. Hopefully we'll get some flowers out in the next coming weeks. Oh, avoiding tornadoes. Absolutely, Jerry, because what? That is scary. Yeah, outside. Oh, Brenda kayaking. Yes. Dog walks. Oh, riding my bike. Okay, so I bought a bike 2 years ago. I've ridden it twice. I've committed myself to riding more this summer. So I'm going to need everybody to hold me accountable to that.
Deja, we'll make sure to ask you at every policy council meeting.
I need it. I need some accountability partners. So I encourage it. I see some picnics in the park. That is super exciting. I would like to not have to carry 3 seasons of clothes to work every day. Yes, because you get to work, it's winter. While you're working, it's summer. You probably get some mid-fall by the time it's time to get off. So yeah, I get that. Yes, Susan, fresh air with the windows and doors open. Yes, 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 yes. All right, we'll give folks like another couple seconds and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. It's 2:04, so we'll officially call today's meeting to order. Shout out to Christina for sharing her screen. You all should be able to see today's agenda. Really gonna go. If you haven't noticed already, Jason's not here. So we'll get an update on the coordinator hiring process. We'll go through our meeting and membership agreements. Jerry has an awesome presentation on statewide HMIS data. The assessment and prioritization pilot we've been working on with ARC for Justice, compensation for those with lived experience. Then we'll get to hear about all of the wonderful work you all are doing across the state. And then we'll have our meeting satisfaction survey before we adjourn for this month's meeting. So we'll start off by approving the agenda. Hopefully everyone has had the opportunity to review. So we just need a council member to make a motion to approve the agenda as it was presented.
This is Sarah Hughes. I move to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Sarah. Do we have a second?
Kara Snyder, I'll second.
Thanks, Kara. All right. We also should have received minutes from the April meeting. Hopefully you all had the opportunity to review those minutes. Anyone willing to motion to approve the adoption of the meeting minutes from April?
Oh, hey, Deja, sorry, just to back up for a minute, I think we have to still take a,
Oh, yes, I'm
all
sorry.
on the.
All in favor. I am
Yeah.
sorry, I am getting ahead of myself. This is,
No worries.
thank you. All in favor of
Aye.
approving the May
Aye.
agenda?
Aye.
Thank you, Christina. Any opposes? Awesome, we passed unanimously. Now, anyone willing to motion to approve and adopt the April meeting minutes?
So moved, Kara Snyder.
Thanks, Kara. A second?
Sure, I second. This is Allison for Micah today.
Thank you, Allison. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. And with that, to the woman who keeps me on my toes, I am passing it over to Christina to review the coordinator hiring process. Christina?
Thank you so much, Deja. Hi, everyone. Christina Soulard, she, her, white. I work at MISHDA as the Homeless Solutions Program Manager. I also have the distinct honor of overseeing the campaign coordinator position that MISHDA is able to staff on behalf of the campaign. So as Deja noted, we are missing Jason. I was going to text him and say we've survived 1 week, and we're counting down each day to when we can fill the position and have a new coordinator come on board. So I'm really happy to share an update on the hiring process for that. So we posted the position, and I want to say thanks to all of the many partners who helped to share that posting and get the information out. We've had a tremendous response to the job opening. We've had over 80 applicants express interest in the position. So right now we're reviewing all of the applicants, narrowing that list down for our interview panel. And I'm really happy to share too that for our interview panel, we have a robust representation on behalf of the campaign that's engaged in that process with us. So alongside myself from MISHDA, we're also going to have representation from MDHHS, Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, also from CSH, Corporation for Supportive Housing, MICA, Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness, and actually, to share some compliments back to Deja as well, representing for the Homeless Policy Council. She will be on our interview panel as one of the Homeless Policy Council co-chairs. So we're really excited to get these interviews scheduled as quickly as we can, planning to complete all of those yet this month so that we can hopefully find our right amazing candidate and have them get started in this work as soon as possible. So that's the update that I have on that for today. Do folks have any questions, comments? Okay, well then I think I can turn it back to you, Deja, if you'd like, or I can help move it along on the agenda to Patrice.
Thanks, Christina. And special shout out to Janine, who is helping take meeting minutes for us today. So we really appreciate you for kind of stepping in and assisting us in this capacity.
Thank you for flagging that. And I'm so sorry. I'll just add really quickly that now that you mentioned that, yeah, we're super fortunate to have Janice Harvey with us from MDHHS. She is taking notes in the background for us. She's also, if you noticed, sent out the meeting information and our documents. So you'll be seeing those emails coming forward from her on behalf of both the Homeless Policy Council and the ICH, as well as a few other meetings where we're able to leverage her help and expertise. So super grateful for that. And then along those lines, I should also mention we've got tremendous backup coming through for a lot of our substantial committee work that's going on. So Janine Yard with MTHHS is helping to take point on the summit planning work, and there's 2 committees involved with that. So there's a lot of amazing stuff happening, and we just really appreciate the way that multiple groups are coming together to assist during this time. So thanks, Deja.
Thank you, Christina. And we will pass it over to Patrice, who's going to review the council's meeting agreement. Patrice?
Thanks so much, Deja. All right, so you all may have been in meetings where you've had some sort of version of meeting agreements or touchstones or something, if you will, to ground the space. And over the last few weeks, as Deja, myself, and Todd have been meeting as co-chairs along with Christina and Jason before he left, we had a chance to kind of connect on meeting agreements. And so, you know, this work is extremely challenging. It's extremely rewarding. It is really personal a lot of times, and it's extremely intense. So whenever we're in space, it's really important to have meeting agreements or ground rules, if you will, because it's important that we let everyone know that their voices are valued, that their voices are heard, and their contributions will be respected. So there are 5 group agreements or meeting agreements, if you will, that we're going to present to you all today to operate under. And so I'll start off with the first one and read it out, and then I will invite a member of the Policy Council to just go ahead and pick up onto the next one. And then as we get through the rest of them. So starting off with Speak Your Truth. Say what is in your heart, trusting that your voice will be heard and your contribution respected. Be aware that the impact of your words on others may be very difficult from your intent.
What things get difficult, turn to wonder. If you find yourself disagreeing with another, becoming judgmental, or experiencing challenging emotions, try turning to wonder. I wonder what she is thinking. I wonder what brought him to this place. I wonder what they are feeling right now. I wonder what my reaction teaches me about myself.
Identify assumptions and suspend judgment. Our assumptions and judgments are usually invisible to us, yet they undergird our worldview. By identifying our assumptions, we can then set them aside and open our viewpoints to greater possibilities.
I'll go ahead and read the next one in, assuming no one's able to read into space. Identify assumptions and suspend judgment. Our assumptions and judgments are usually invisible to us, yet my apologies, value feeling as much as knowing. Emotions are welcome here, and we give ourselves permission to share authentically. Many feelings are not valued or accepted by our society. However, they are all a part of our humanity.
Expect and accept non-closure. We want to resolve issues, but this is lifelong work. This is a process. Sometimes we may have to revisit conversations to reconcile differences, and in other cases, things will be left unfinished.
Thank you all so much for reading into space. So as you all have had a chance to kind of to hear these and what they mean, I'm curious if there is anything that you did not hear in space that you would like to add to. if you want to raise your hand or type it in the chat. I'm not seeing anything. All right. Okay. So if we're all in agreement, can we get a head nod, a thumbs up, some sort of indication that we're all in agreement and we're all on the same page with respects to these meeting agreements? All right. Perfect. All right. I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up, head nods. Wonderful. Well, thank you all so very much. And just as a reminder, we'll just lean into these as we go through this incredible work that we have. And we absolutely will be expecting and accepting some non-closure, valuing feeling as much as knowing, identifying assumptions and suspending judgment, speaking our truth. And it should be when things get difficult, turn to wonder. Thank you, Deja. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thanks so much, Patrice. So, you know, Patrice, myself, and Todd kind of serve as the co-chairs of the council. So, you know, there will be some times where we uplift some of those meeting agreements if there is you know, an instance where we kind of get off track a little bit or just to center us back into the work. So please never take it as though we are being disrespectful or hurtful or have some sort of ill intent. We just want to make sure that we are sticking to what it is that we've agreed to and that our meetings are productive and that they're safe for everyone to express their viewpoints as well as their feelings. So thank you so much, for Patrice, for kind of leading this work for us. With that, I am going to turn it over to Lindsay, who's going to review the membership agreement that we've been working on.
Hi, everyone. Okay, I need a head nod or a clap or a reaction or something that you all hear me.
I
Hi,
hear
Lindsay.
you.
Hi, Lindsay.
Thank you,
Hey,
thank you.
Lindsay.
Deja, I love the dance too. Thank you for bringing that. I hope you all are having a wonderful day. And I'm excited to be with you on behalf of the membership committee. And so, Christina, can I share my screen? Awesome. Let me open this for you. Okay. I think at the last meeting or the meeting before, I think it was at the last meeting, the membership committee shared that we had been working on a membership agreement, and this is something that that policy that has never existed for the policy council, so it's new. And we the membership committee kind of sees our role as facilitating the kind of application process for when there's new members. We supported kind of the restructuring of the policy council, and then now really see our role of how do we make sure that we're supporting the membership, but also helping to bring clarity to kind of expectations. And one of the things that we heard, I think in January and in February from folks in this space was, what's expected of me? Like, I'm coming here, I'm participating, but I don't really know kind of what's expected of me. And then really thinking about for the categories, the different membership categories. So the appointed members, the COC lead agencies, the homeless service providers, people with lived experience, and open seats. You know, those categories were created for a reason. And so we wanted to spend some time really hearing from you all, kind of what you think the contributions are, those various kind of membership groups are bringing. And so the membership committee has started, and this is very much a draft. And so today is about getting more information from you. And we're writing this kind of agreement from the perspective so the idea is that members would be expected to sign this and commit to this. And that there's also some kind of accountability to it as well. So similar to the meeting agreements that you all just discussed, This is kind of a little bit broader, kind of what are the various perspectives that you're bringing? And so some of this probably looks familiar because it's been pulled from the application that you all applied for. But we've just kind of built out some of this. And so just at a kind of quickly, some of the things that we've identified as expectations and that were a part of the application process was being a champion for change. And so really understanding, being knowledgeable and informed of the action plan. The action plan kind of guides the work of this body and the campaign to end homelessness overall, and really advocating for it both at the statewide level, so making sure that our work is grounded in that action plan, but then also helping with your various networks. All of you all here have a lot of different networks and spaces that you're working within, and so kind of being that voice and representing the work of the campaign in those. And then I'm trying to embrace like joy more, so also celebrating when there's success, and when we grow and make changes that may feel really hard. The second is around promoting inclusivity, so supporting the campaign to end homelessness commitment to race equity, doing your part in this space to create a welcoming environment. You know, we all have, based on our different identities, power. And so really thinking about your power within this space, and not all power is bad, but really how are you kind of participating, showing up in this space, and really thinking about power, really working to understand unconscious bias and how they impact thinking and engagement. And then commit to listening, valuing, and utilizing the experience of people with lived experience who are equal parts in ending homelessness. And then we get a little bit more nitty gritty just around attending meetings. And if you all have worked in kind of community coalitions or COCs or other bodies, you may have seen a membership agreement like this. And it's, you know, expectations is the word that oftentimes gets used. And I think about it from the perspective of how are we all clear on what's expected of us, that we're not having to make assumptions. And it's not to penalize people or anything like that, but just make sure that there's clarity and that we're all kind of thinking about this from the same page. So we have included in this draft right now the expectation of attending 2 meetings per quarter, and letting the coordinator know if you're going to miss more than one. We know that the bylaws group that's going to be working on the bylaws will also touch on this. And so we know there's going to be some things within the bylaws that may impact this agreement as well that will require us to maybe pull it out. But I wanted to include that just for you all today. That, you know, that we're actively engaging in conversations, that we're pre-reading materials, and we provided some examples of, you know, when we talk about participation, actively engaging, you know, committing to a respectful dialogue, we wanted to provide some examples. We also know that everyone engages differently, so this does not mean that everyone has to be talking all the time, but that you are able to participate via chat or breakout groups or things like that, and so that there's not just one way that you can participate. And then the expectation of participating on committees, which I know that you all identified committees that you were interested in being a part of, and so that would be part of the membership agreement as well. And then the final piece is around connecting and collaborating. And this is really about connecting dots between the various communities that you're working, the various agencies that you're working within, between that work that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, and then the work that's happening here, the action plan that is moving forward. So really making kind of those connections between the statewide work to your local organization, to your local communities that you're working with as well. And then even like within your own, if you work at a really large organization or a really large state department, that you're helping connect those dots for people that maybe aren't deeply as engaged in this work. So, we wanted to take some time today and we're going to try something. This is not something that I can remember that we've done before, to do some breakout groups. And I'm going to explain kind of what the breakout groups were, or kind of our goal with the breakout groups, and then share with you kind of like discussion questions. When the membership committee created kind of this new structure, which is right here. Are you all still seeing my screen?
Yes, we can see your
Yes, yeah.
screen.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, the green sort of square around it just went away. We intentionally created kind of these appointed members and then these elected categories because we wanted a diverse array of perspectives, roles that you're serving in the work. We intentionally kind of created this. And I don't remember who asked this question at the very first meeting in January, but someone said, I applied under the homeless service provider category, and that's the type of member I am. What's expected that I bring from that perspective? So how am I representing, how am I contributing from the homeless service provider lens, from the COC lead perspective, as a person with lived experience, and how are you contributing to the work of the policy council? And so we really wanted to hear from folks within those specific categories. And so we're going to do breakout groups that will bring together the members that are appointed, the homeless service provider members, the people with lived experience members, the COC lead members, and then the open members. And then if you're not a member, we also have kind of a guest breakout room. And some of your breakout rooms may be very small. There may only be 3 people, and that's okay. We really want to hear from you on kind of, as whatever member type I am, how are we contributing to the mission of the Homeless Policy Council? Because we wanted to hear that from you all. And then we are going to take that as the membership committee back to help inform kind of the next kind of draft that we bring back to you all. Hopefully that we can then approve moving forward. And so if you're wondering, I don't know if I'm a member or what category I am under, I've put this on the screen. So you can see kind of if you're an open member under the open category, if you're a COC lead member, or an appointed member, just so everyone can see. And if you don't see your name, likely that means you're a guest, and you would then go to the guest breakout group. I see Kara. Oh, Kara, yes.
I'm pretty sure I'm not supposed to be in the COC lead group. I applied as a lived experience, and that's what I mean, I am a COC chair, but that's not really what I joined this group for. And it's not, I just didn't know.
Yeah, thank you, Kara. It's funny, I saw your name and I was like, this doesn't look right. And so thank you.
Yeah, I'm also in the COC LPB group, so that might be part of how wires got crossed. Sorry. Thank you.
I really appreciate that. Sorry, if anyone else sees any problems, please just let me know. I copied and pasted from another document, so it's very likely I messed up somewhere. And so the question that we're going to ask of you all, and I'm going to share in the link or share in the chat a link to this Google document. And we're only asking one question. And it's about kind of, unless you're a guest, it's about the specific role that you hold. And so Deja, for example, you're under an open seat. And so your group will find the question, and I believe it's the second to last page, that has open seat in bold. And you all can then drop in notes, kind of, what do you think? what are the contributions that you're bringing to this space? Are there things that you would like to be bringing as the COC leads or people with lived experience? And there's no right or wrong answer. And it's not that anyone has done anything kind of wrong up until this point. We just want to make sure that we're having this dialogue around kind of who's at the table, and what are some of those expectations. Other people from the membership committee, I know we just talked about this earlier today, so are there other things that you would add? I know you all are a very talkative group. Yeah, we can paste those questions into the chat as well.
Yeah, I just think that just want to really emphasize that this is like gathering from you why you came here and what you believe is your contribution, not what you think our expectations are of that. Because when we do take this back, your honesty and openness is going to make sure that we capture the fullness of all of our ability to contribute to this group. And we may see things that we hadn't thought of. So this is more information gathering and direction, information for us.
Yeah, thank you, Susan, for that. I am pasting the questions into the chat. And I will also drop the link to the Google document. And if you all don't want to take notes in the Google document, that is okay. If your group doesn't, just make sure the notes, you can put them in the chat, you can direct them to me. Just make sure that someone is sharing kind of the notes with me from that group and the discussion that you all are having. And then lastly, for the folks that are guests who did not see their name listed as a membership type, the question for you is a little different. And the question for you all is kind of what contributions do you think that the various kind of membership categories are bringing to the policy council? And so do you have thoughts around those categories that you think would be helpful for the membership agreement? Questions before we start the breakout groups? Oh, let me share this. I'm going to drop the link to the Google Doc. And just as a way to have some place to take notes. And if you as a person have thoughts around any of the other categories, you're welcome to add those in as well. So the way we're going to do the breakout groups, hopefully people have participated in breakout groups, but if not, that's okay. You're going to self-select the breakout group type that aligns with you. And so if you're an appointed member, you're going to select the appointed group. If you're the homeless service provider, you'll select that group, so on and so forth. And then the guest will select the guest group. And anyone can, and if people have questions, feel free to ask. Christina, could we start the groups?
Yes, fingers crossed that I can figure out what we're doing here. But yeah, so we're gonna have 6 and folks will be able to choose. Do you want me to, I'm sorry, it's just giving me an option now to name the groups. Would that help? Or do we just need to do 1, 2, 3 to 6?
Just do 1, 2, 3, and I'm gonna number this. Okay. So 1 will be appointed, 2 will be people with lived experience, 3 homeless service provider, 4 COC lead, 5 is open members, and then 6 will be for guests.
Perfect. I think folks should have the ability to select their breakout rooms.
Yes, and so you will see on, it should have just popped up on your screen, and you can click on the right-hand side, you'll see a blue button that says join. Join your respective room, and we have about 10 minutes. 10, is that okay with the agenda? Okay, about 10 minutes, and we'll come back together. All right. Welcome back, everybody.
That was a great activity, Lindsay.
I'm so glad, and I love breakout groups. So thank you. I feel like it gives us an opportunity to get to know one another and have hopefully good conversations. So thank you, Aisha. We have a few minutes in the agenda, and I would love the opportunity to hear from any of the groups. Kind of a little bit about your discussion. I was able to see some notes that people dropped in, but would love to hear from anyone that feels comfortable sharing.
Just to let you know that we put our notes directly on that document where you gave us our room assignments.
Yes, thank you. I saw that and I was like, oh, and I was able to decipher. Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I know you all have lots of brilliant thoughts, and so I'm curious if anyone will share anything. Or I can pick out breakout groups to share too. Please don't make me do that.
Lindsay, this is Sarah. We only had 2 people in our group, but we had a lot of the same thought processes about what we could bring. Just being providers, we have a lot of the frontline facing components that aren't always thought about. And we come from all different places throughout the state of Michigan. So we have all the different facets depending on population and ruralness versus cities. And I think that all of those components are really important. And that we were both as well, like we want to learn. So
thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that a lot. Others?
So I'll
Daisy,
share.
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So we all had a lot of similar thoughts as well. We feel like as people with lived experience, we can kind of help bridge that gap between like providers and different organizations, and the people that are on the other side of the system, to inform policies, to help give feedback, on like the spaces that people with lived experience are being welcomed into. And also we can bring like, fresh ideas, different viewpoints, because we have different experience than what people who are usually in these spaces have.
Thank you, Asia. And I was very stumped on why I saw Allison's name twice. And so I'm so glad that you spoke. And I was like, that's Asia. So thank you for sharing.
No problem.
And that creativity piece, like I just want to highlight that because I know that like you all wrote that in there as well. Just the bringing of fresh ideas, different ideas, is really I think a helpful and kind of perspective and contribution specifically from folks with lived experience. And so thank you for elevating that piece. Is there anyone from the guest group that would like to share?
I can share.
Go ahead, Catherine.
Someone else can. So we talked about, I think a couple of the themes were just like that it's very important to have all of these like different voices around the table, because everybody kind of like plays different roles in solving homelessness. So I think that was a big piece. And then I don't, yeah, Rachel, what else were you gonna say?
I think actually Catherine brought up the point that, it's important for the, appointed members who are, a part of MDHHS or other agencies, that they are able to go back and, advocate for changes that are needed, or policies that might be needed, and how important that is, that they bring that to the table.
Thank you. Thanks, Catherine and Rachel. Others from the COC lead, the open categories, or the appointed members? That you would like
Lindsay,
to-
I can jump in for the COC lead. I was the only one there. I actually had a chance to join with another group, which was a wonderful conversation. But just I just lifted up the continuum of care, having sort of a 30,000-foot view, if you will, of the systems, the providers, organizations, and some of the gaps that need to be filled, as well as the finance piece, the funding, and all of that, and bringing that to the space to help further the mission.
Thank you, Patrice. Anybody else?
In the open group, we uplifted advocacy a lot too. Greg is a part of the Michigan health system, and we spoke about like the intersectionality between the homeless response system and the health system, and how there other system overlaps as well, and how we're kind of in this space to kind of tear down some silos and make them work as a system so that we can better take care of ourselves and others. And then, like, personally, I work in county government. And since I've been in this space, I've noticed that there were lots of issues surrounding homelessness and housing that county government really didn't have any idea about. So, like, being in a space where I could bring certain things to the county's attention as to like what's going on locally, but also what's going on at the state level, and kind of being able to be the liaison between like the state as well as like local county government.
Yeah, thank you for lifting that. And I think that alignment piece, like there's this ability to kind of align, I think, the work from the local level to the state level. Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to share before we transition to our next agenda item? Okay. Thank you. If you have additional thoughts, feel free to drop them in the chat. You can send them directly to me or the whole group. And I appreciate your all's time today.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you for everybody for participating. With that, we're going to turn it over to Jerry, who's going to talk about some of our statewide HMIS data for 2023.
Yeah, and good afternoon, everybody. Let me share my screen here. Just a second. So I'm here to talk this afternoon about what is going on when it comes to data. So many of you may know that we are getting ready to begin the process of assembling the 2023 statewide annual count on homelessness in the state of Michigan. And we did some initial runs of data to give you all a preview of what we're seeing happening across the state when it comes to homelessness. So there's an important note that I want to share before getting into the data. So number one, pulling the final data for 2023 has been delayed due to significant issues HUD is having with the 2024 PIT count and housing inventory count. So the PIT and HIC process this year is delaying the pulling of our 2024 report data. And this is largely due to the fact that we're having issues, but HUD is having some issues with their reporting system, which is called HDX. It's resulted in 2 delays on the reporting deadline. And what has happened with that is because of this delay, we have a large number of pages across the state or areas that are holding areas for data that is essential for the point in time count. Now, those areas are things that we need to turn off. And I'm getting into some of the technical details for you all so you kind of understand it. But those areas are things that we need to turn off before we can run final data on the 2023 count. And the reason being is for the purposes of the point in time count, that data is important, but often when we're looking at data across the entire year, that data can be a duplicate of data of actual people who are being served through other agencies throughout the year. And what it can actually do is inflate the count a bit above what it should be. And so we always are waiting until we finish the pit and hick and the federal reporting season before we turn off that data and get a final count data that we can use to build the report from. And so I want to talk about a couple things really briefly. So first of all, pulling the data for the annual report, we pull all of the HMIS data. First of all, there's a number of sources where the data comes from, including a variety of our other state partners across Michigan. But when it comes to the homeless data in terms of the HMIS, or our Homeless Management Information System, we pull it from a tool called the Michigan HMIS Data Warehouse. And all the reports that we use are ones that also local COCs and communities can also use to understand their progress in ending homelessness. And something that we want to do is we want to encourage local communities to go ahead and run some of these exact same reports and understand what they're doing and how homelessness is changing within their local communities, because local communities have the same opportunity to do this just like we do at a statewide level. And the next thing I wanted to do is just take a brief review of some of the recent data trends that we saw during the past couple of years. So first of all, during the COVID-19 pandemic, what we saw is we saw a significant fall off in the number of persons who were literally homeless during the pandemic. So during 2020 and early 2021, our numbers decreased pretty substantially. And this was due to a number of factors, the biggest of which was the eviction moratorium, whereby people were not, of course, being evicted from housing and were allowed to stay in housing because of the pandemic. But it was also due to factors such as family and friends allowing others to double up with them, and then longer stays in other forms of housing, which tended to stop persons and households from becoming homeless in the first place. But what we saw during 2022 was we saw in last year's report an 8% increase. This was not a increase per se in the sense of a growing number of homelessness, as much as it was more of a bounce back to pre-pandemic levels of persons who were experiencing homelessness due to the changes in the post-pandemic environment. Obviously, we saw the eviction moratoriums begin to clear through courts, and then people were being unfortunately evicted again from housing. And with those changes taking place, this led to an increase overall between 2021 to 2022, which was more reflective on a return to our pre-pandemic level. And the other thing we saw was that the numbers that we saw in 2022 really mirrored national trends that were going on across the country. So one thing that I want to say, and I say this more for myself sometimes and for some of us at the state level, those of you who are on the front lines definitely know this. If you've experienced homelessness, if you're working with in local communities and actually working to end homelessness with agencies and on the front lines, but data tells us what happened in a community and in the state of Michigan. But the data doesn't tell us why that happened. So the trends that we're seeing here really require conversations with people who are experiencing homelessness, with case managers and agencies on the front lines to understand better what our work to end homelessness looks like. And when we begin to look at data, the data is going to show us what are some of the changes happening. But in order to put context behind those changes, we really need to have those discussions. And honestly, many of you at this table with the restructuring of the Homeless Policy Council. I know many of you are fierce advocates and working on the front lines and doing some great work. And so you do have that experience of understanding the why some of these changes are happening. And so we definitely want to create space for you to share what you're seeing and what some of the factors that you believe are impacting our work in ending homelessness in Michigan. So let's take a look at the data. The first thing that I want to say, so this is a comparison between 2022 data. This was the final published data that we had in the 2022 annual report compared to the draft data that I just ran within the last 2 weeks for 2023. And the message that comes through pretty clearly, to give you the quick 5-second version, was we did not see a significant change upwards or downwards in the overall number of people who are experiencing homelessness. We really remain fairly stable. So you see here, we saw about a 1.6% change in the number of people experiencing homelessness, an increase. Statistically, this is really not a significant change when we take a look at it. This is really kind of maintaining status quo. So we haven't seen a shift upward or downward. We see one thing we do see a little bit there, the number of adults declined just the slightest, less than 1 percentage point. The number of children slightly increased. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at there are more children per household that are seeking services in 2023 than in 2022. There's a slight increase. There's a slight decrease, meaning probably more single parent or single adult households. But again, this is something that is minor enough that it is not a statistically significant change that we're seeing within this overall number. So if we take a look at a couple of the subpopulations, one area we did see a pretty significant fall off in were people who were identifying as first-time homeless persons. So the total number of persons who were identifying as first-time homeless dropped by nearly 6% during from 2022 to 2023. The real drop was in children experiencing homelessness. You see, we almost had a drop of 20% in that category, but we did have a drop in households of about 4.25% and a decline in adults of about 3% in first-time homeless persons. Another significant change we saw was the decline in persons who were veterans who were experiencing homelessness. So we saw nearly an 8% decrease in persons who were veterans who were homeless. And I've got a couple of theories behind this, but again, this is something that I definitely want to open up. And as we go through creating the report, we'll create some space for this. But I have a feeling that there's been obviously a large number of resources and programs which are really focused on addressing homelessness among those who have served their country and those who've been part of the armed forces. And I think that the increase in funding and the increase in resources that deal with veteran homelessness are one of the big reasons why we're seeing a decline in veterans who are experiencing homelessness. But we definitely are interested in hearing from the front lines of what some of your thoughts are. Adult-only households, these are going to be households where either A, it's going to be a single adult, or B, it's going to be one or more adults in a household without children. This was virtually a dead heat. There was no change in this. You saw 0.13%, 0.16% in households. So if we look at this, this was no change whatsoever in the number of people that we're seeing here. And if we look at adult-child households, these are going to be our households where there is at least one adult over the age of 18 and one child under the age of 18. Most often, this is going to be a parent in a household with a child, one or more parents or significant others in a household with the children. We again saw a statistically insignificant change. We're less than 1% in this area. The children per household, you can see it here, have slightly increased while the adult numbers have decreased a slight bit, which means that we're getting more children per household than we did in 2022, but it is not a significant change. We did see a small decrease in senior adults age 55 plus who are experiencing homelessness, just over about 2.3%. This is again, this is actually getting into statistically an area where this is a change that is, I don't want to say significant, but it is there in a positive way, that we've seen a reduction of number of persons by about 2.36%. So this is something we are seeing in the data. What we do know from national research is that the number of senior adults who are experiencing homelessness is going to be increasing without additional resources until about 2027. And so seeing this begin to trend down is a good thing in Michigan, but know that statistically there is still a window in which, due to the number of baby boomers who are entering into the 55 plus age, that the number of people who are potential for experiencing homelessness are increasing. So this is one thing that we want to continue to keep our eyes on as time goes by. Looking at, and this is one thing I do want to put some important context in. So this is looking at change by race, ethnicity throughout the state of Michigan. What we see is we do not see any significant changes, except for one thing I do want to put an asterisk on. So all of our first four categories, which include First Nations, American Indian, Alaskan Native, no change. Asian American is less than 1%, but it's really no change there. Persons who are Black or African American, no change, as well as Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander. You do see that there appears to be a decrease in white and an increase in multiracial. However, HUD did a very big change this year in how they record race and ethnicity within data systems. And one of the changes basically meant that they merged together the race field and the ethnicity field. When they did that, historically, people who identified as being Hispanic, oftentimes in the race field, the value of white was selected. And then, of course, when you got down the ethnicity field, the Hispanic option was selected. With a new way of collecting data in the merged fields, it is possible to just select Hispanic and not select white. Because of that, you're seeing a statistical reduction in the number of persons who are white, because they're not having to double up on entering that value. So this is not necessarily an actual demographic change in the population we're serving, but it's more a change of how data is being collected due to HUD's change in the data standards. I don't have information right now for the number of persons who are Hispanic because of that change. We are currently working with the vendor that is responsible for our tool to try to understand how HUD is going to be measuring this here in the next few months, and looking at this from a reporting standpoint under these new specs. And we're going to have that number available for the final report that we publish, of course, for the state of Michigan on homelessness. But right now in the draft data, because of the changes and how this is being measured, I don't have the information on those persons identifying as Hispanic, but we are working on that. So the next thing we want to take a look at is outcomes data. And this is going to be data around what are some of the outcomes that we're seeing in the work of preventing and ending homelessness. So there's a couple outcomes we typically look at. Obviously, the demographics, the first thing we look at is the number of people who experience homelessness. The other three key things that we look at are the length of time that somebody's experiencing homelessness, the discharge rate to some form of permanent housing for people experiencing homelessness, and then the returns to homelessness at the end of that. For people who've exited to permanent housing, we ask the question, do they return within a period of 2 years? So for length of time homeless, we saw a slight tick up of 2 days, which is not, again, statistically super significant, but we saw it go from 77 to 79 days. One thing that is of note is we had a specific COC in Michigan where we had a significant data quality issue historically that we excluded from the 2022 count due to that outlier because of data quality issue. That COC was able to get data cleaned up in the last year, and so we did include them in the count in 2023. So we went from lacking all of our 20 COCs in Michigan. We just had 19 in 2022. On this measure, we did increase to all of the COCs in 2023. So that is one factor that comes into play on this. The next thing we look at is this is for persons who are in emergency shelter, transitional housing, and rapid rehousing programs, also safe haven programs. When they exit, do they exit to some form of permanent housing? So we saw a slight decrease in people who were exiting to permanent housing. In 2022, we were at 46% of people exited to permanent housing. We went down to 44% in 2023. So a slight change, negative change, but it is not a significant change when it comes to this data. And then for the persons who are returning to homelessness after exiting to permanent housing, I can tell you right now that we have an issue with the report. We did have a number of 20.9% of people return to homelessness in 2022. Right now, 2023, the data is incomplete due to an error in the report that we're working with our vendor to correct. But this will be a number that we are going to be working on getting so that we can put it into the report here as we begin to do the report writing for the 2023 annual report. So I know we have a limited amount of time here, but I do want to see, and Christina, if you could help me with this, but if there are any reactions that you all have to the initial draft data you just looked at.
Nothing so far in the chat, Jerry, but with what you shared, one thing I was thinking about was how some of this information might align with what we have under the state action plan for homelessness. So I know when the state action plan came together, we had listed some specific goals related to the measures that you highlighted. And I know from 2019 into 2020, we saw a steep drop in the percentage statewide, or in the numbers statewide, of folks experiencing homelessness. With the 2022 and 2023 data, and some of it being, like you said, like statistically less significant. If we were to kind of pull back from the time frame of the state action plan to now, like, has there been a significant uptick from that decrease, or do you have enough information to talk about that at all?
I think the difficult thing about that's a good question there. The difficult thing about that is we faced that anomaly in the pandemic, which was not necessarily a result of the work that we were doing to end homelessness. It was a result of the pandemic, with a drop in the fall off and the return. What we're seeing is roughly, and it's a little hard to measure totally because of the nature of how things happened during the pandemic, but we're roughly seeing that we returned to pre-pandemic levels of homelessness. So we're about in the same ballpark of what we were seeing in 2018, 2019 when it comes to homeless numbers. So really, it's kind of a flat table if we look at it and kind of take the pandemic window as being an anomaly in the data set there.
Thanks for that.
Well, if there's no questions, we can go ahead and I will wrap up here and hand it back over to you, Christina.
Excuse the quiet, awkward quiet as I'm moving things around on this side of the screen. Just to add a little bit to what Jerry had shared as well, he referenced the annual homelessness report. That is a a product or a project of the campaign, and we do that through the Homeless Policy Council here. This year, myself and Lynn Henges from MDHHS will be co-chairing the work of the annual report committee. In part, we've been a little bit delayed in bringing that group together because of what Jerry mentioned with the release of the data. But these broad strokes, I think, will help us have at least a starting point for conversation and the makeup of that work. And I'll take a moment just to plug, if anybody wants to join that work, please let me know or let Lynn Henges know. We would love to have as many folks involved as possible. And we're really fortunate with the membership that we do have that's been a part of this work for the last several years. So a thank you to them, and please, you're welcome to join to everyone else. So let's see. Deja, if you're okay with it, I think I'll just I'll move right into the next item on the agenda, because that one is me. The next two are me. So my apologies in advance to everybody, but I'm going to provide an update on the assessment pilot work that's happening with ARC for Justice. Just as some background on this piece, as folks may be aware, for quite a while, there has been more than enough information available to demonstrate that there are inequities built, specifically racial inequities built within the use of the VI SPDAT, which is the Vulnerability Index Special Prioritization Decision Assistance tool. And for a good number of years, it's been a requirement by both MISHDA and MDHHS to utilize that tool as part of our funded projects across the state, which include the Emergency Solutions Grant Program, or ESG, and also the Emergency Shelter Program, or ESP. And so I think it was early 2021, we had messaging that came out from both of our agencies in partnership to say, we recognize the inadequacies of the tool and the concerns with the tool, and we want to take an intentional step away from that. But it has taken a long time to figure out what is the best process to do it, especially with something that is built into so many layers statewide, and not really having just another tool to pull off the shelf, and honestly recognizing that just pulling another tool off the shelf might not be the best approach in this space. So through the racial equity contract work with ARC for Justice, formerly C4 Innovations, MISHDA holds the contract with ARC for Justice, but it's really in full support under the campaign. So the selection process and working with ARC for Justice originally, all of that flowed through the Homeless Policy Council here. So fast forward to 2024, ARC for Justice has been working with a smaller subset of folks from across the state as part of the planning work for the assessment pilot. Excuse me. And the culmination of that planning group's work is coming up. So we have coming at the end of this week will be a statewide email that will go out soliciting interest from continuums of care to join into the pilot process for testing out new assessment and prioritization practices, perhaps developing tools based on those practices. It's relatively open-ended, but at the same time, given ARC for Justice's work across the country, we're also able to delve into some work that's happening in other states and things that we might be able to leverage as part of our pilot process here. So for the COCs that express interest in the pilot opportunity, all of those expressions of interest will be reviewed by the planning group, and then we'll narrow it down as needed to 5 communities to move forward with the pilot work. timing is still a very relevant question with all of this. So our contract with Arc for Justice is slated to end June 30th. We're in the process now of doing a no cost or requesting a no cost extension to that contract so that they can continue supporting the pilot effort alongside of us. So hoping to get an extension approved, but there's some internal work with Mishta and the board to be able to do that. If for some reason that doesn't happen, we will revisit kind of what's the best approach or how we could potentially continue this process. But with the release of the effectively, it'll be a survey link that will be included within the email going out at the end of this week, along with an introductory document that just describes the context and scope and rationale for the assessment pilot. All of that will be provided statewide at the end of this week. COCs will have roughly 3 weeks to respond to the survey and express their interest in joining this work. We're also ensuring that the COCs that respond in that space are providing compensation to folks with lived experience that are participating in the work locally. As part of that discussion, which will lead into our next agenda item here, the planning group around the assessment pilot said that they wanted to see at least $50 an hour for folks with lived experience that were engaging in that space. And that decision was made based on the information that just came out in April from HUD regarding a whole toolkit that they've provided in working alongside of and partnering with folks with lived experience, which also includes more information about compensation overall, and compensation based not only on the type of work that's being requested or sought at the COC and other bodies within this work, but also based on what region of the country the work is occurring in. So recognizing that there may be differences in pay structures just based on cost of living and things of that nature. So we'll be talking about that a little bit more as part of the next agenda item. But before moving on to that, just want to pause here to see if folks have any questions about the assessment pilot, the work up to it, anything that I might be able to answer, or if I can't, we'll bring information back.
Christina, this is Sarah. Do you have like a target number or idea of like a good group amount to start that work or to continue that work, I guess?
Can you clarify that a little bit more when you say the right amount, like from the local level, or?
I think across, like, I'm sure you want like I don't want to say eclectic group, but like a good a good representation of all the different components. But do you have like, I know how when you have like 300 people in a group, it gets to be like super unwieldy. So just like, do you have a target number of how many you want from each area maybe, or a full target number?
So I think from within the COCs that are selected, so we're targeting for 5 COCs, and you're right, there would be a desire for like adequate geographic representation or makeup, of like rural areas versus more densely populated areas and what that would look like. So that's kind of baked into this process, the review process for the planning group. And then from the COC representation itself, there is more information that's included within the introductory document that'll go out with the request for interest. But yeah, it does kind of talk about like who should be at the table, who should be engaged within this work, and ensuring that there's effective representation from across the COC. So I don't know if that helps to answer what you were looking at, but if I can provide more detail, let me know. Great. Thanks, Sarah. Any other questions? Okay. So I'm going to move on to I'll take advantage of being in the seat and move on to the next agenda item. So just to set the stage a little bit for what we're talking about here, starting in January, we began doing compensation work within the Homeless Policy Council for our members, and there's targeting for folks with that are coming in with lived experience that are not paid or compensated through other means for their time and efforts and talents within this work, which are greatly valued and appreciated. So before that could happen, the prior membership of the Homeless Policy Council needed to come to some sort of agreement on how to do compensation. What would that look like? How would it be structured? And so we've been operating with what the prior Policy Council membership had put together, which was $40 an hour and limited to a total amount monthly that would be provided. And it was focused explicitly on formal members of the Homeless Policy Council. And so what I mean by that is if folks were attending the Policy Council but were not recognized as a member, there was no compensation, or there's been no compensation available to support that work in this space. So what we had committed to through the membership last year is that we would revisit our compensation practice as a Homeless Policy Council at a midway point. And this is where we are now to kind of solicit more feedback from the membership to just re-examine what we're looking at. And just to be clear, the re-examination is not to suspend compensation, to stop doing compensation. That is still the promise. That is still the fact of the work that's going forward. So that in and of itself won't change. But I think that this is an opportunity for us to be able to talk about the particulars of the compensation work and process, if there's ways that we can improve it, if there's ways that we can grow it. And also to have kind of an open-ended discussion as well about what resources are used for compensation at this point and how we might be able to identify additional resources to support compensation or to support expanded compensation, based on our discussion here today. So the intention of our discussion, and I want to say thank you in advance to Lindsay with CSH for assisting with this, but we're going to do essentially a brainstorming. We're going to work through each of the items that are listed here. We're going to leverage the chat. Folks can come off mute and share ideas and thoughts on each of these topic areas. And then with Lindsay's support, we're also going to leverage Menti. So just in case folks, Menti does provide more of an anonymous way to provide feedback, which is totally fine. And if folks are more comfortable doing that, that's acceptable too. But we'll work through each of these areas and gather feedback from the folks that are here today. And then all of those recommendations are going to come back to the back to the membership committee of the Homeless Policy Council. And they will work through that feedback and pairing it with our current guidance and approach with compensation, bring back a formal recommendation from the membership committee based on the feedback here and current practices. And that will come to the June meeting of the Homeless Policy Council. And then that will inform the work going forward starting July 1. And the importance of that June 30th, July 1 indicator is because MISHTA is currently the only agency or funder that's putting funds forward for compensation. And the way that we do that is through our grant agreement with MICA, which is the Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness. They build that into a grant request that they make to MISHDA, and then we've specifically asked for that support in partnership with them through the current grant. Their current grant ends June 30th. The new grant would begin July 1. So all of the information that the Policy Council is providing here would inform that approach starting July 1 moving forward. So I've said a lot of things there. Before we shift into the feedback space, do folks have questions about what we're going to talk about, questions about current process or how the work is being done at present? Okay, no worries, not hearing anything. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And Lindsay, if you wouldn't mind sharing your screen, that would be great.
I will. And I also I just dropped into the chat the link to the mentee. And you can click on that link and then it'll take you to the questions. And then I also just pulled up on my screen the questions, and there's a QR code. If you want to scan that QR code with your phone or something or some other device, you can do that, and then you can add responses that way as well.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. And I'll be talking us through the questions as we have them up here. We'll take time with each one. Again, feel free to come off mute or to use the chat or to use the Mentee link that's available. So the first question that we have is there any feedback regarding adjustments for the payment process itself? So this would include things like the hourly rate, which I mentioned is $40 an hour. The maximum number of hours per month, which essentially equates to about 8 hours a month at this time, because the total cap of monthly payment is set at $325 a month for the compensation through this group. And then sorry, I might be skipping ahead on other questions in my mind. So are there any recommendations, any feedback regarding those items for compensation? Great. I'm glad to see folks chiming in on the Mentee. Please keep it coming. Appreciate that. And as folks are typing and kind of thinking through this, I will flag, and we did include it in the agenda. As I noted, HUD came out with some compensation recommendations dependent on the work that's being asked and the area of the country where the work is occurring. And the $40 that we have noted for the Homeless Policy Council membership per hour is probably more toward the lower end, not absolute rock bottom, but definitely on the lower end in comparison. And so as I noted with the assessment pilot work, the recommendation through that group was to go above what we're using for our current Homeless Policy Council rate and making that recommendation to COCs of $50 an hour for engagement in that work. So I'm only flagging that just as additional examples of things that we've heard. We've also seen, I think it was a ICH meeting, might have been toward the end of last year. I can't remember the timing, but we had some discussion from folks within the state of Michigan from different COCs of monthly rates that they were supporting. And those went up to $100 an hour for compensation. So as we can see, there is a significant range here where the work is operating. And so that's where a check-in like this is incredibly helpful, and trying to make sure we're hearing out all of the feedback from folks. And thank you so much, Daisha, for dropping that into the chat. Right. I don't want to rush this for folks, but kind of seeing it's slowing down a little bit. We could try moving on to the next question. Okay. So another area that we want to be able to talk about and ensure coverage for is what other activities should be covered. So at present, we have a few things noted within our guidance for compensation. So attendance at meetings is covered, so that would include the Homeless Policy Council that meets once a month for 2 hours. We also have any subgroup committee or work group that's a part of the Homeless Policy Council. Any time spent in those spaces is also a covered activity here. And then we had something, proposed within our guidance that we really didn't put a lot of detail into, and that was things outside of the Homeless Policy Council. So what would be considered maybe like non-Homeless Policy Council meetings, but that they still are a part of the overall work of the campaign and still have some, connection to the Homeless Policy Council. We've not been very explicit around that. So for example, this could include like attending the Summit on Ending Homelessness or attending the Interagency Council on Homelessness meetings. So may not be a member in that space, but it's also not something that's been clearly defined for compensation yet through the Homeless Policy Council. So just flagging that if folks want to think about that as they're bringing responses to this. Other activities that we've had listed, but we've not been as descriptive about in our guidance would be things that would help with reducing or eliminating attendance barriers. So some of those examples include things like travel cost if we have in-person meetings, maybe childcare assistance and coverage that's needed, while folks are attending meetings. Yep, this is great to see. Technical support, yep, keep those items coming in. So those are things we have not been as clear about within our guidance and would like to drill into further. So please feel free to keep chiming in on responses. And I'm going to pause here in case anybody wants to come off mute or add anything into the chat. Yeah, I love seeing the feedback coming through, and thanks for the questions that have been dropped in too. Has there been a short survey of the people that have received compensation about their experience? That's a great point. That has not happened as of yet. Could this include support to bring people with lived experience together consistently to prep and debrief and elevate issues and concerns? That is an excellent question. I think that looks like that might partner up with some of the other responses here. That's fantastic. Looks like this is slowing down a little bit here too, so we can go on to the next question. And Lindsay, I should check, can people keep adding into the Menti even as we advance, or does that?
I think that's a setting that I did not make, but I can double check. And
Oh, okay.
But I'll check, but keep going.
No worries. Thank you so much. Yeah, I don't want folks to feel like we're cutting off the feedback. And sometimes if you're anything like me, sometimes I really need to be able to process stuff before I can respond in a way I want to. So it's okay if your responses aren't coming in at this meeting. We can certainly provide other opportunities for giving feedback that can go to the membership committee. So as I was mentioning before, our compensation plan right now is really limited to people with lived experience that are official members of the Homeless Policy Council. So looking for help and feedback on what folks think we could do collectively that would help to compensate folks that are not official members of the Homeless Policy Council, but are still folks with lived experience that aren't compensated for this work in other ways. What could we be doing collectively, or what ideas are out there to maybe be able to provide that compensation effectively? So one thing that's come up, oh, okay, thanks, Lindsay. Yep, we can do that. Appreciate that. So one thing that's come up in other spaces before, when there's been limitations with funding or the availability of funds, would be like approaching the COC to see, we're really fortunate to have someone from your community working in this space. Would the COC be able to help support their time in this space with compensation? That's something that, HUD has looked at in terms of like maybe COC planning grant dollars, other things of that nature. What other ideas, thoughts, reactions do folks have about being able to provide more effective compensation? Give me a thumbs up if you're thinking real hard on this one. Thanks for that response coming in. Oh, good question. So is there a required match to the funding through MICA? Could that be an additional resource? There's no match requirement at this time because it's funding from MISTA specifically to MICA. We're not using a federal funding source for that. So there's not at least a federal match requirement, and MISTA has not extended a match requirement to that grant. So good question. A good, thoughtful thing to review. Oh, great. Yeah. Could the Policy Council itself or ICH take requests to private funders? Great question. Finding ways to recognize folks in this work. Yeah. Give it another moment here just to see if folks have other thoughts, ideas. Okay, Lindsay, I think we can move to the last question, if that's all right. I think it's just one more. Okay. Glad to see somebody was able to get one in right at the last minute. Sorry about that. Okay, so sources of compensation. So as I mentioned, the budget for compensation within the Homeless Policy Council right now is wholly dependent on the grant arrangement that we have, or agreement that we have between MISTA and MICA, and the funds that MISTA is able to put on the table for this. So what other sources, I like that. Are there other sources? Yes. Okay, good. What other sources could we potentially look at or explore or lean into for support of compensation within the Homeless Policy Council, or if we're able to pursue more than just the official Policy Council membership, who else could we be talking with or working with to identify funds? So other state departments, private philanthropy. Just to reframe this a little bit as folks are thinking, I'm wondering from the COC level, what sources of funding are COCs using right now to support compensation for folks at the local level? Is anybody willing to share?
I can share, at Kalamazoo County, we're using private philanthropic dollars to support our community consultants.
Excellent. Thanks, Patrice.
When I was working with the Outland County COC, we leveraged some discretionary funding from MDHHS initially, and then started leveraging the COC planning grant.
Awesome. Thank you, Deja. Okay, so some COCs aren't. Thanks for dropping it into the chat, Kara.
Yeah, I kind of like this space because you guys actually give me some sort of compensation because, yeah, I've been doing the work for a while now for free. And then actually, I run a small service of my own that I do for free. I'm almost 3 years with giving out free menstrual products.
Wow.
So, yeah, I see, I've got a lot of illnesses and I can do a lot of this in my pajamas. I'm on SSI. So, to be able to help and advocate and still be able to do it with my disabilities has been really wonderful.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you also for the amazing things that you're doing. And from, I don't know if I want to call it like my personal hat, but I think it's not just my personal hat, but like that type of work, that type of commitment and what you bring to this space, Kara, and what others bring to the space overall, it doesn't matter where we're coming from, we should be compensated for that work. And to have some folks that are and some folks that aren't is not a good, it's just not a good place to be. And I think that was why it was so critical for the Homeless Policy Council to do that. And hopefully we'll see a change for COCs across the state to be fully embracing things like that.
Christina, I think it's really so hard too, coming from like community action. There's a lot of like rules about like you can't pay people with lived experience to be on your board, but you can for other components. So it's really like trying to find the best way to provide like that compensation for their time without going against the rules that we have in place. So it's finding other ways, and it's a lot of creative work to do this, but a lot of local private organizations like Rotary and things like that have tons of grants to help with people with lived experience. And I think it's just a matter of taking the time to apply for them for most part. But I mean, it's hard on this level for the Policy Council, I'm sure, to be applying for a bunch of grants, but there is funding out there right now.
Thank you. That's great to know. I'll see if our community can look into something because, I mean, as I said, I'm on SSI. I'm not really allowed to make much, so it doesn't affect me, but I'd really like to see, people being more, you're going to feel more welcome and more valued something.
Man, thank you for sharing that, Kara. That was fantastic. And I love seeing the exchange of ideas, even within this group. This is phenomenal. So just recognizing too some of the things that have come into the Menti here. Could we ask COC leads if they're currently funding this within their COC planning grant? Absolutely. And I'll share too, just from Mishta's perspective, folks are probably aware we have our emergency solutions grant application process that's underway. And the first part of that we call the Exhibit 1, which is just really collecting information from COCs about their current operations and priorities and different things that they're doing. And one of the questions that we have some pretty explicit detail that we're soliciting from COCs is about compensation, what they're currently paying and how they're doing it. But I don't know that we asked what their source of funding was. So I'm making note of that, and I'm really glad that's flagged here. And I think that's something we could definitely look at further. Could the Homeless Policy Council engage United Way Statewide Association and Michigan Council of Foundations? They may have ideas. Great suggestion. Thanks so much for sharing that. And just acknowledging all the other ones that have come up, private foundations, city, county, Rotary, churches, faith institutions. Thanks for sharing all these folks. I know we're getting close to the end of our time, so we'll go ahead and stop the discussion here for now, but as mentioned, and it's also on our agenda, we have the membership committee that will be meeting and reviewing this feedback. So if you do have additional feedback to share, if you go to the bottom of our agenda for today, we've got points of contact listed for each committee. So please feel free to reach out to Lindsay, who's on today, and Ashley Halliday-Schmidt, who's also the other co-chair for the membership committee, with any other suggestions, feedback, comments. It's greatly appreciated. So I'm going to turn over the remainder of our time to Deja to close us out, and I'll reshare the screen here.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you all for participating. Can't wait to hear kind of a summation of all the feedback that we received today and what the membership committee does with all of your recommendations. Now is that time in the agenda where we hear from you all some of the important events or program services, what's new in your community, what you all have going on. It's time for our roundtable. Is there anything that any of you want to share about work that's going on within your organization or respective community?
Sure, this is Allison from Micah. We have a free training once a month. The one this month is really, well, anyone's welcome, and it's really great for anyone, but it's on how do you do resource navigation. So it's really good for frontline staff or newer staff. If you scan that QR code, it'll take you to the information so you can register. We also have our Breakfast of Champions coming up, so you should register to attend, but then you should also nominate someone that's doing the good work in your community, because we know that lots of people across the state are working really hard to end homelessness. So we'd love for you to nominate, and I'll try to put that information in the chat as well.
Thanks so much, Allison. Catherine.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Deja. I just put in the chat box a link to a job posting. The CSH Michigan team is hiring a senior program manager. So please feel free to share that job posting with your networks. And then I also just wanted to share real quick that as part of the action plan, one of the strategies within the action plan, as folks are aware, is to increase service funding for supportive housing. And CSH is the champion assigned to that work. And so I just wanted to provide an update that we are actively working on that and have been able to present recently to a couple different committees within the House and Senate, which I think were some great opportunities for education around supportive housing and homelessness. And the budget process is in full swing, and we will not be getting $25 million. I can guarantee you that. That was the ultimate goal within the action plan. But we're hopeful that we'll see some funding in the state budget this year. So we'll keep you posted on that as the budget process moves along.
Thanks, Catherine.
And I'll add a plug real quick. We do have it at the bottom of the agenda for today too, but the Building Michigan Communities Conference is happening next week. It's happening at the Lansing Center in Lansing. Looking forward. I'll be there, so feel free to come find me if you want to chat all things MISTA campaign, the weather, gardening. I think folks are mentioning I'm a big fan of all that. But that's happening next Tuesday and Wednesday. And then just to make a plug for the upcoming meetings of the council, they're on the agenda as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Christina. And then Patrice shared in the chat, the Kalamazoo County COC is hiring a team of 6 to 8 community consultants or people with lived experience within the last 5 years. And they will be charged with leading and guiding the work of that local COC. They've had 33 applicants and are currently holding interviews. So that is super exciting. Shout out to Patrice and Kalamazoo County. It is now 4 o'clock. I did drop the link to the meeting satisfaction survey in the chat. So please fill out that survey. It takes 2 minutes. But please fill out that survey. So Christina, as well as myself and Patrice and Todd kind of have some guidance on how meetings are going and, what we can do to pivot to make it meaningful to all of really a good use of all of our time. And help us to really push this work forward. But thank you all for attending the meeting today. Anyone that want to make a motion to close this meeting?
This is Sarah Hughes. I'll motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thanks, Sarah, because I was thinking everybody wants to stick around for a second. A second. Anybody?
I second Kara Snyder.
Thanks, Kara. All in favor?
Aye.
There's the excitement.
Aye.
Okay. All right. With that, please fill out the meeting survey, the minutes, and all the supporting documents or whatnot will be sent out to you all shortly. We appreciate your time and we look forward to seeing you all within the next few weeks. Enjoy the rest of the week.
Thank you.